Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Today is Monday, June 2nd. On May 29th, Amazon Prime released an 8-episode crime drama based on the 2019 novel The Better Sister by Alifair Burke. The show stars Jessica Biel and Elizabeth Banks as two estranged sisters who are forced together after tragedy strikes their family. Having read the book and now watched the full show, let's first address how this series came to be.
Do you know who David Milch is?
No.
Okay, well, he's pretty famous. You know what Deadwood is, right?
I do know what Deadwood is. I never really watched it, though.
Well, this seems to even be like a reunion of Deadwood because there's a couple actors from Deadwood in
I was
this.
not getting that from the book or from the... It's not at all like a cowboy show. This is a whodunit, high-class, like, New York elites being framed / figuring out whether or not someone... I don't want to get into the mystery quite yet,
Right,
but yeah, how did the show come to be?
The reason why I mentioned David Milch is because his daughter, Olivia Milch, she was the person that created this series.
Ah, okay.
She also wrote and produced the Ocean's 8 TV series. She produced the Hello Tomorrow, Billy Crudup Apple TV Plus series as
What is
well.
the Ocean's 8 TV series? I'm
Oh, sorry,
familiar
the
with the
Ocean's
movie.
8, the Ocean's 8 movie.
Oh, with Sandra Bullock.
Yes.
Yes, so
And-
female-centric.
Yep. And
Yes.
then Regina Corrado, she's the showrunner for this. She's worked on Deadwood, Sons of Anarchy, The Strain, Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, Tulsa King, and Mayor of Kingstown. That's kind of where the drama came into place. And then Alifair Burke, I don't think that she has much to do with the TV series. She said,
Interesting.
I think she basically said with an adaptation, an author lets go of the work to change new hands in a separate form.
How did they get Jessica Biel and Elizabeth Banks to partake, to become the two main characters?
I think they were both just the reason why it was them two is because there's been this like forum at least or this question that says that they both look so similar they could be sisters.
So the casting director said, let's take that and actually cast them as real sisters.
Yes, when Olivia Milch approached them, they both were interested in working with each other.
I think Jessica Biel just likes to be covered in blood because I've seen her in Sinners where in like the first episode, she just gets doused in the stuff. And same thing here. She finds her dead husband in the first episode and she just jumps into it like it's a pond.
It's
all
over her dress, right? In the first episode.
Fancy dress. She just gets soaked in it and then she goes running out like it's a Scream movie, falls over, the cops pick her up. But my takeaways from the book, I do want to like go over those before jumping into the story, okay? So Alifair Burke, I have to give her credit. I've read a lot of like crime novels for this podcast, but Harlan Coben and Stephen King, they like to do them a lot. They like to do female-centric characters from time to time. Fool Me Once, and then this year's, what was the most recent one? Missing You, yes. And the difference is that Alifair Burke, kind of what I realized in Expats too, just writes women better. They're more authentic, and it's because she is one. And also, like, just her tenacity or understanding of media, internet, and youth so much better than Stephen King.
Yeah, I mean,
when Stephen King tries to write, like, hip lingo of the youth, it sounds so jarringly bad. And hers, it was like, it just went really well with the style, and I found it much more credible. So unlike Fool Me Once, the main character is also not this 6-foot badass who's never done anything wrong. Our main character, Chloe, has a lot of problems. So ultimately, I really thought that as a whodunit, it's a pretty good book.
Yeah, I mean, Alifair Burke, she's a professor of law, a legal commentator, and also, of course, a New York Times bestselling author, but her books are known for authenticity and often draw on real-world cases. She reminds me a lot of Earl Stanley Gardner. He was an author and lawyer, but he created the Perry Mason character because,
Wait,
they
he
have
didn't create the character. So like this is 100 years ago?
Yeah, but I'm comparing the two because it seems like they both have a background, so they are able to write it better because it's authentic.
Mm-hmm. The underlying message is also family, which I think is the biggest selling point of the show. It's about the better sister, right? And so you're led off in the beginning to think that the better sister is the one who has her life together. And then as the story goes on, you kind of learn that they both have their endearing qualities. So it's a decent story. It's entertaining. It did take too long to disclose several twists because there's a lot of them. But Chloe's affair, Adam's physical abuse, he's the husband who we at the beginning are to think is just this great guy. And then we learn later on that he actually was abusive towards Chloe. And then their dad also being kind of like that, except way worse because he sexually abused, it seems like, her sister and her mom. but she was so young that she didn't remember a lot of that. And they toned it down for the series, but we'll get into that in a second. So it's similar to Expats, it's similar to Big Little Lies or Disclaimer, because you have this inner voice. It's a narrated book of from this successful woman. She runs her own, or is editor of her own, like big magazine in New York City, and she's dealing with this very strange situation where she has to navigate both her career and what's going on with her son being accused of murder, and her sister coming out of the woodwork after all these years and trying to deal with that drama as well. So how will the show adapt those things is how I was mostly looking at the first episode of the series, like Chloe's selective memory, her not necessarily knowing about her traumatic past.
Is it an unreliable narrator that you follow in the book?
Yeah, to a certain degree. It's less about her lying straight out and more about her just having kind of gaps, things where she's remembering, kind of like in the Happy Faced Killer, where her initial memory, and this was in real life, was of like this cabin back in the day and
Right.
her dad being a nice guy and them hanging out at this pond. It's kind of a similar memory with Chloe. She would remember dancing with her dad and him being like a manic energy type figure, but then realizing that like the reason why they put locks on the doors was because when she got her period was because that they didn't want her to get molested. Also, the slow turnaround of Adam being presented as this heroic good guy, with an ambitious lawyer, into like this evil scumbag who may have deserved to die by the end of they have to kind of do that delicately because they did in the book, and I was just wondering how they would pull that off.
Right, because Corey Stoll, he even said that when he plays a villain, usually it's just okay. He like they're crazy, and he like an Ant-Man or anything like that. He's able to just be full on villainous. But here he said like no, Adam's not really a psychopath, so he had to kind of walk the line thinly.
Right. And then also she's having an affair. And in the book, they're allowed to do this where they can kind of make the main character into a douchebag and then later on kind of show why they had their reasons for it. In a show, you can't really start it off that way and still make the character likable. So they do delay showing that her and Adam's best friend Jake used to be sleeping together. However, unlike in the book, they retain that relationship throughout the trial. And in the original story, it was all in backflashes because once she finds her dead husband, I don't think she sleeps with him again.
She calls
but
it
if
out.
she does, she only does it once. And in the show, it's much different. Another thing I was curious about was that there's a storyline where her son, actually, it's her sister's son, Ethan, who is the one who is accused of killing Adam because he lies about certain things. He brought a gun to school, and I wasn't sure if they're going to change that or omit it from the actual TV show because we've seen TV shows where they like to I don't know. I even heard that they took off the Michael Jackson episode from the Simpsons DVDs
Yeah.
over the last couple of years. Like they don't want to get too close to real stuff.
That's
Sometimes.
usually the way it is with like source material. I remember even in Kick-Ass 2, they decided to change stuff from that film because
Yeah,
there was a lot
I
of
was thinking maybe they would show him acting out in some other manner, but they did keep the storyline where he brought a gun to school and they basically paid off the school not to kick him out. And then finally, Chloe. Let's go ahead and ruin the ending because anybody who's watching this knows that we're reviewing the whole season.
Yeah, right.
Chloe framing her husband's 80-year-old boss. So in the book, we don't see the boss all that much, but when Chloe figures out who actually does it, she realizes she has to protect them. And so she ends up going to a guy who didn't murder anybody, but very well could have. And so she kind of pins him for it. Now, in the book, you're left wondering, like, he technically is innocent. So maybe part of the reason she did it was because he was so old. However, he's cast as Matthew Modine here.
Yes.
And so what they did was they aged him younger. They made it so it didn't seem like he had Alzheimer's.
He's in it a lot more also, right?
He's in almost every single episode, and they made him eviler on the face of things so that when she frames him, it's just more acceptable. That was the type of change I was expecting from Ethan's gun. It was that they were trying to make things more acceptable to an audience. So my comparisons from that regard are Gone Girl, because you have a man accused of killing his spouse, and in this case, you have the son accused of killing the father. Kim Dickens plays the detective in each role. So you kind of see this is like she's literally the same person.
And she's also an FBI agent, I believe, or something like that in Deadwood also.
Okay, but is she investigating a murder? And then adolescence, because you have the kid accused of murder. I had to throw that in there. Lawyers, detectives, courts. And then Long Bright River. You remember that series we did pretty recently? Also had a sister who was like almost a twin to her, but her life had led her in a completely different direction.
Right, exactly. So this has been compared to Long Bright River, but also Sirens, because it's also female centric. And then I know that Elizabeth Banks, she said herself that this reminded her of Presumed Innocent.
Yes, but oh man. So in episode 6, that's where we get the courtroom scene, and I wish we had gotten more courtroom scenes because that would have been more like the book. But let's jump into the plot here
Right.
because you kind of have to understand the full story, right? So Chloe Taylor, she's the successful journalist. Her career has like really, really gone off over the last couple of years after the Me Too movement because she works for a magazine that really focuses on that type of issue, The Real Thing. And her hotshot lawyer husband Adam, they own 2 houses, one in the city, one in the Hamptons. And the dirty on that is that it's Adam's second marriage. He was originally married to Nikki, but because Nikki had a breakdown, she was a drug addict and also an alcoholic. And there was an incident where she almost drowned Ethan, their son. Adam moved to the city to take care of Ethan alone. And then he ended up hooking up after that with Chloe. So there wasn't like an affair going on while he was with the other sister. They ended up just getting married later on, and then they had a restraining order against Nikki. So that was the way everything like came. That was the way that the situation was set up.
Is it fair to say that Chloe was closer with Ethan than she was with Nikki at that time?
Yeah, I mean, Chloe's relationship with Nikki kind of dies after the drowning incident where Ethan almost dies. Like she just doesn't have any contact with her sister, doesn't want any contact with her sister, even though her mom heavily pressures her to try to rearrange that bond. But it's just she doesn't trust Nikki. Right.
Right.
And a lot of her memories are clouded with just like that she always had to be taking care of her or that Nikki was just this screw up.
But even though it's Nikki's child, Chloe cares for it
Ethan?
almost more than he cares for it almost more than Nikki.
Well, of course, Ethan's mom is Chloe in his eyes. That's the person who's raised him since he was 3 years old. It's the only person he knows. However, it's that teenage awkwardness years, the 16-year-old where he's starting to look at girls, but he's also like, she's afraid that he's an incel. At least at the very beginning. That's not depicted in the TV show as much. Yeah, so Chloe comes home after this awards ceremony / soiree. Her husband was supposed to be there, but then he like either didn't show up or he left early. And then she comes home and finds him dead. And the cops arrive. They take her statement. They go to the son's where the son is hanging out. Ethan is at one of his friend's houses. They interview him. They interview the friend. And they start to notice there's like some inconsistency in the story. Ethan also says that his shoes are missing from the Hampton house where his father was killed. And he also has this strange cut on his arm. So they start to get a little suspicious. Ethan and Chloe, between the two of them, the cops are pretty sure one of them did it. But they're settling on the fact that it was Ethan. However, they don't tell Chloe that right off the bat. And that's when Nikki arrives because Nikki is officially still Ethan's mom by the paperwork. And so when anything having to do with his legal responsibility as a someone who is not an adult, it still falls back on her. And she arrives.
Interesting. Even though I feel like
They never adopted him.
Adam would have tried, I feel like, especially after the drowning incident, to try and get Nikki off of like any type of
Well,
responsibility.
he had the restraining order, and I guess they figured that Adam would always have the final say to Ethan's where he's going and stuff like that. He was controlling in that way. However, I think they did explain in the book there was a specific reason why Chloe didn't become his official mom, and I just don't remember exactly what that was, but it made sense. So Nikki arrives. She has a lot of baggage. They're in the city at this point at their penthouse, really rich place. And so she has her bags and she moves in. And so it's Ethan's mom, Chloe, and they haven't spoken in forever. And that's when Nikki she sees the red flags. She is the first one to realize that the cops are not being friendly because they're just nice people. They're actually trying to get more information without having to get served a warrant, you know? And so she tells them to screw off and they call a lawyer in, and that's when the word comes in and Ethan gets officially arrested. And then that's where the second episode ends, is Ethan is in jail and everybody's wondering who actually killed Adam. We don't know as an audience yet who did it. We just are pretty sure it's not Chloe because we saw her discover the body. And so it would be a really, really big twist if it was her. And so the first two episodes are very solid. They do the setup right. They show all the suspects. They present a classic whodunit mystery for you. And really, we were only going to do the pilot, which is She's My Sister. And I was going to give it a really good review. I was going to say it was like Broadchurch, 7.5 out of 10 for me. They kept 80% of the book. And they had to adapt it from her voice, her inner monologue, and then they had to create scenes to fit that, or even change scenes to make it easier for them to like tell in a non-text way. And I think they, for the most part, accomplished that. They added a little bit extra drama between the sisters, like the violins in the background were a little much. But the first two episodes were extremely solid. But when you told me that it was going to be 8 episodes long, that's where I started to get this unsettling feeling. I was curious, how were they going to stretch the remaining material by so much?
People said that it should have been condensed to like 5 or 6
No,
episodes.
I'm saying that because 4 episodes would have been a great series. This would have been like a British, one-off. That's why I'm comparing it to Broadchurch. They did not have 8 episodes worth of material. They should have gone directly to the courtroom the next episode. Someone gets arrested for murder. Think of The Night Of,
Right.
which one of the characters here was in that show. But they did him getting arrested, and then it went immediately to trial, and it was only like 4 or 5 episodes, right?
Right.
And so with this, 3 more episodes of treading water. That's what happens. Episodes 3, 4, and 5 accomplish little to nothing. They're bland, they're uninteresting, they're lifeless. It completely zaps the series of all the momentum it had had in the first 2 episodes.
So Adam goes to jail at the end of the second episode.
Adam is dead.
Or sorry, I meant Ethan goes to jail.
Ethan goes to jail.
And they don't even like go to the court trial until episode 6?
Yes, it is a 9-hour book. And they tried to make it into an 8-hour series. And you would think, oh, they're being, but that's not how books work. It's like you can tell a lot more. It's crazy. Like, oh, okay. So the cons, let's get into those. All right. So they expanded and they invented too many characters. Kim Dickens, Matthew Modine, Lorraine Toussaint, Paul Sparks, Michael Harney, Deirdre O'Connell, all great actors. All pretty famous, most of them playing very similar characters to that they played before. Kim Dickens, we already talked about. She was from Gone Girl playing a detective. Paul Sparks has been a writer in House of Cards. He's a writer here. He's just he also is in charge of an AA meeting group. And then Deirdre O'Connell, she is the crazy mom in Penguin, and she is now Adam's crazy mom here, who I don't even remember from the book. What? She can't get. She gets a paycheck though, and so they're hopelessly overused. All of the characters, even the ones that are in the book. The detective, it's Kim Dickens. She was great in the first episode. However, they try to give her so much backstory. By the end, they make her into a little bit of a villain. In the book, she's one of the heroes.
In the book, I understand she's also supposed to be more utilitarian.
Yeah, and her side cop is also supposed to be much less in it. He had his own, like they tried to divide and give them so much more work in this television show. It was like this was their only case for months upon months. It was crazy. They provide nothing but empty rabbit holes, boring meandering backstories, repetitive conversations, excuses for the sisters not to talk to one another, leads that are meant to just make us feel bad for one person or another, but not actually like move it. It's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, the AV Club talked about how many subplots and red herrings there were: burner phones, affairs, PR campaigns, FBI agents to avoid.
And some of them are kind of connected to the overall arc of the book, but most of them are just the doorman, completely like made up for this, and they just added him in like I think the later episodes as a suspect for no reason.
I think it's because a lot of people, like even Regina Corrado, this was like a reunion for Deadwood. She wrote for Deadwood. Kim Dickens was in it. Michael Harney, who was the doorman Arnie.
I'm sorry, what? Like this is called The Better Sister. You're adapting a book. Why is it a reunion for Deadwood? Like I understand that they cast people like that. It does feel like they got a bunch of famous people and they didn't have enough roles for them, and so they started making shit up for those people, but like why? Why do that?
I
Why even
think
cast them to begin with then?
I think it's well, Kim Dickens and Regina Carrado, they
Kim Dickens
say
fit the role. It's just that they gave her way too much storyline. It was like, oh no, we got a big time actress. She leads like series. We have to give her more airtime. That's not your role in the like. You are a very side character in a book. It's mostly Chloe, and it comes at the expense of people who are tuning in to see Elizabeth Banks and Jessica Biel.
right, because from what I understand in the book, a lot of what makes it interesting is that these two sisters, their tenuous relationship, kind of their tiffs that they have. I believe that the show, didn't they cut a lot of that out?
But the thing in the book was that she had all this negative perception of her sister over their past. And so a lot of those are memories. And the Nikki that is now here is stable. She's a rock. She's the one who's calling out the BS from the cops. She's actually showing that she is helpful and that needs to be in Ethan's life and deserves to be in Ethan's life. But they didn't even do that they were mean to her in the show. They had her go on a bender. They had her be just as, like, I guess, chaotic and crazy as she was in the past. She's always a wild card, but like in the first few episodes, I liked how she made friends with the taxi driver really quickly, or the person that she split the Uber with, because it showed that she still has that kind of like, I'm a free spirit. I
Ryan
can be
reminds
friends with
me.
everybody. But instead, in the later episodes, they made her out to be just as crazy as Chloe is. And Chloe is going through her own spiral. Her husband just showed up dead.
So from like kind of what you're describing, it seems like Nikki starts off almost like Jesse Eisenberg from A Real Pain. She still has like, despite the fact that she's damaged, she still is kind of nice to people.
No, Jesse Eisenberg is like this
Oh,
very,
sorry, not Jesse Eisenberg. I meant Kieran Culkin from A Real Pain.
yes, but like Kieran Culkin is still broken by the end of that movie, right?
Right.
And in this, it was like she's got her life together. And in fact, some of the past memories where you thought that she was such a screw up, she was actually protecting you. Like that type of realization occurs. And instead, I feel like they lean too heavily on the fact that that she's supposed to be this. She literally just sleeps with one of the servers at Adam's wake, and then starts doing just drinking like crazy, falling off the wagon. She spends so much time in AA. She ends up sleeping with the AA guy. That's the Paul Sparks character, and she's not hanging out with her sister. At the same time, her sister is supposed to be paying attention to her job, to Ethan's case, and she's out having that affair still with her dead husband's best friend, when she knows very well that that could implicate her very poorly if anybody figures out about it.
So Nikki doesn't really have the arc that the book gives her, where it's like by the end she's supposed to be better. You're saying that Nikki is kind of just portrayed as she never actually does.
In the first two episodes, it's exactly like the book. Episode 3, 4, 5, as they were meandering, the only way they could possibly inflate this story with more stuff was just to infuse drama and empty drama, stuff that in the end wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter that she's sleeping with the AA guy. It doesn't matter that Chloe eventually breaks up with this guy that she's with Jake, Adam's best friend. It doesn't matter that you give Bill more scenes. It doesn't matter that we learn the backstory of the cops or the precinct, or follow that investigation and their quirkiness. Like, none of it plays a bearing in the actual case. And that we have to wait until episode 6 to get. And it's very telling that the show creator, Olivia Milch, you said, right? She wrote episodes 1 and episodes 2. Yes?
Yeah, no, I think Regina Carrado wrote episode
Okay,
2.
so episode 1 and then episode 6 and then episode 8. And those, I would say 1, 2, 6, and 8 are the only episodes you should watch if you're watching this series. The rest is empty. And then
you would understand it.
And yeah, for the most part, if you watched it previously, you would understand it. It is also funny that in the book, I think there's a character named Olivia who is the lawyer, and I think they changed her name to Michelle. She's one of the few people I think they changed the name to. And it's funny because the book's version of the lawyer is she's so clinical, so she's so good at her job, and she's able to figure out how to get Ethan off. But Michelle's character is terrible at her job. I would fire Michelle so quickly because she ducks Chloe's phone calls the day that her son is arrested and being held in jail, like all day. She just doesn't return those phone calls. Then she gripes about Adam's relationship, the fact that Adam was married to Nikki and then married to Chloe, and she just makes it out to be the biggest, craziest like white woman drama that's ever. She made it such about race for some reason, and then she takes the prosecution's side about how Ethan should be in jail because he's getting special treatment already for the case being moved up because he's white. Race really doesn't have an impact in this book or in the fact that the husband was abusive or that her like the trauma that they're dealing with.
Sorry,
And
I just want to point out, you're saying that the person that's supposed to be helping Ethan
yes,
is saying that he should be
she's
in
being
jail?
extremely judgmental, and her behavior is not something that you would want for your own counsel, especially when you can afford how much that Chloe can afford, right? And so I just don't see why they keep her. Even at the end, she's super salty because the person that Chloe is having the affair with, Jake, right?
Right.
Apparently, the lawyer is also had an affair with him too.
Right, that
That's
wasn't in
not
the
from the book.
book.
That's
Yeah.
just completely bullshit. Yeah, and the only reason they did it is because they killed Jake at the end, which doesn't happen in the book. And so they want to prolong this. Part of the reason I think they made it into 8 episodes is because they were told this could be more than just a miniseries.
Well, I don't know because I mean Olivia Milch and Regina Corrado, they kind of talked about the difference in the finale, and even though they said yes, there may be a season 2, they honestly felt like that was a good place to end it. They said all the source material has been used up.
It has.
It's been
Yeah.
billed as a miniseries, and they said the ending with Jake was not supposed to give you all the answers, but was supposed to kind of be a product of what happens when people when death occurs when making this kind of violence. And
They
these
absolutely are
decisions.
bullshitting that because they left an open gap as to what happened to the FBI guy who was being such an asshole to Chloe and to the cops and everybody he was dealing with. They left a question mark about the Gentry group. They left a question mark about what happened to the dead guy on the beach, again, Jake. And they left a question about why Olivia was showing up at his place so late that day. It was all up in the air around that. Yes, they answered the book's questions. Who killed Adam? It ended up being Nikki after all. But why did she do it? Because she was protecting Chloe when she
Self-defense,
found
yeah.
out. Sort of self-defense, yeah. But she also planned it out. Like she left her cell phone in the book at her previous, like in a different state, so she would have an alibi. She knew she might kill him, and she did that because she found out that he was starting to hit Chloe. And so I was happy that they kept all that stuff in there because it makes sense. And the story itself is still compact if they had chosen to write it that way. I just really don't like what they did with the lawyer. I don't like that they gave Nikki the storyline that she fell off the wagon. It doesn't lend any credibility to her staying in Ethan's life afterwards. It also, they made her a little bit more crazy by saying that she'd snuck him a phone when he was 11 years old, as opposed to in the book when she had only given it to him like a few months earlier, and that was after Ethan had found her. So like it makes her seem like she was disobeying what Chloe had been trying to set up for the longest time anyways. But there are some pros. I can't just all diss on the show. I think that the fact that they didn't change the important stuff, they should get credit for that. There's 6 different twists, and for the most part, they kept them all. The affair, using the affair to get the son free, the son staging the robbery, the abusive relationships, Nikki's confession, framing Bill. The court scenes, I think, were really well done. They were just too short. Corey Stahl's scenes, Adam's scenes, I think they did a tremendous job with that. I think that by the end, you do root against him, but it took a while, and they did show him to be a pleasing like person for the most part, and that's someone that you could put your mind into.
You will not find a article that the one word they used to describe the finale was twisty. And it seemed like it was just like, yeah, you said there's so many twists, and even Corey Stahl being a bad guy is supposed to be a twist in and of itself, right?
They've been hinting the whole time. In the book, it's hinted at stronger because you get more backflashes, so you see it happen. But like, for instance, when he took the gun to school, the way that Adam responds to them is so overbearing that it makes it pretty clear that he's a very controlling guy. In the TV show, they just have him making fun of his weight a lot, being like, "Oh, if you want this scholarship, you should definitely like stop eating that much." And I guess that shame is the thing that they're keeping. Yeah.
So what would you give it out of 10?
3.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. Only
Episodes
3.5.
3 through 7 are borderline unwatchable, exception of 6. Maybe, yeah, the poignant writing happens in episode 1. So watch that. And if you like the book, even watch the first episode because you'll like that adaptation of it. there's still questions that I don't even think they meant to keep as questions. Like when Chloe gets and finds Adam's dead body, we see in the backflash with Nikki that she took the knife with her, but then Chloe finds the knife at the scene of the crime.
That was almost unbelievable to me. It's underneath the car, right?
No, she takes it with her outside, drops it when she's coming to find the cops because she hears the cop sirens outside, and then the cops drive over it. So the knife ends up underneath one of the cars. She puts it into her glove compartment later, and then Nikki finds it. But Nikki is shown as having taken it in her murder scene. So that never made any sense to me. Why they decided to keep the gun around so much in the book, she gets rid of it as soon as the whole school incident happens, which makes sense because she doesn't want a gun in the house. But in this, they keep it around like a Chekhov's gun, but it never gets used ever. And they show it a bunch of times. And then how did the kid get a girlfriend while he was in jail? Because he comes out of jail and he's like, "Oh man, there's this girl that I want you guys to meet. Her name is Heather." It's like, where'd you meet her?
You're echoing a lot of complaints that critics have said. It's 63% on Rotten Tomatoes, 85% audience score, 6.8 on IMDb. But like the Hollywood Reporter said, like Sirens and Long Bright Rivers, this is an overextended movie that nobody would make as a movie, even with big names like Beale and Banks attached. And then Collider said the message is so awkwardly shoehorned in that it comes off as a random afterthought at best. The themes don't come close to reaching the groundbreaking heights of Sharp Objects or Big Little Lies Season 1.
This could have been such a good show had they just done what they did with the first 2 episodes and continued on that pace. But make episode 3 all the courtroom, all the drama there, because that's when you see why Ethan, it seems like it's the prosecution's case to lose. And then last second, that's when Chloe comes out with her admission that she was actually a battered wife, and that is the reason why she was having an affair, and that it may have been Jake that killed him. That was all and that was all stuff you had to wait till episode 6 to get. It explains why what happens. And then in the last episode, you can have her deciding, once she finds out that Nikki's the actual person who killed Adam, that she's going to frame Bill, and also the cops just don't need to be there. They just don't need to be there.
The only other information I have is that Elizabeth Banks, her character is based after Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, JFK Jr.'s wife, and Princess Diana. That's who she used as influence, and she got sober for 3 months to fit the role.
Yeah, again, free spirit, wild card. However, they just send her on a wild goose chase halfway through the series for no reason. They also, I think it takes away sort of the story arc that's going on with Chloe and her father, her vision of her father, which has always been like, I wish I could have saved him. And then by the end, she's like, I'm glad he died when he did. He ended up dying at a baseball game. You don't even see that in the show. But like, they downplayed his abuse to the kids and the wife. And I don't know if that was a good decision or if it was like fitting because they were just trying to cram so much else in there. But thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.